welcome to another tutorial of mine, and this one I'm actually going to do it properly. Yeah, so today I'm going to show you how I do my scales for my dragons. I will show you the detailed scales that I do and just the much simpler version. So I'll just get started straight away. So what you want to do, you can just pick whatever color you want for your background. I'm not going to actually draw the dragon because that'll take too much time. So I'm just going to color the background with like a sort of electric navy-ish blue. Make a new layer, and what you want to do now is you want to get black and the airbrush tool, and this depends on how thick you want your lines to be, but I will show you the less detailed ones first. So actually this is what you want to use the pen for this. So I'm just going to make my brush a little bigger. So what you want to do, if there's scales that run along the head or the leg or the toes or the tail, you want them to be, you want to actually get white, and you might not make my brush as big, and those ones are sort of large. You just sort of space them apart a little bit. Yeah, they're not that great, but maybe for I might do some other details, like just put in the leg to show you. But yeah, it's just, I think you get the idea. It's just basically this. So what you want to do, say if this is a leg, I'll just do an outline here. This is so terrible. This is just quick toes or something. Yeah, so quick. Anyways, that's what you want to do. So you put the thick ones along like your toe edges and stuff, and then you want to like put your smaller ones along the other sides. So like this, you don't want them all to be even because scales aren't exactly even. So I'm just going to speed it up now. Okay, so what you want to do when you have completed that, you want to get your eraser and see the density here. You want to set that to about half, or whichever suits you best. You make your brush a decent size, and then what you do, might make the brush bigger. You go ahead and you sort of remove the sections. It sort of blends it a bit. So instead of using the blend tool, which makes it a little worse, you kind of use this. It works better when you're doing much bigger drawings, but this is just to show you how I do it. See, this is close up, but if you look from a distance, it looks pretty okay. So you just want to sort of not push hard, you just want to lightly sort of feather it so it sort of blends it out a little bit, so it's not so dense. Doesn't look that great, and it doesn't look too bad. And you can change the opacity of the layer to suit you. So, and you just keep doing that until it suits you, really. But with the legs, I don't normally put I put these larger scales on them, but what I tend to do is actually tend to do lines like this, because scales on the smaller scales on the feet don't look that great in my opinion, so I just end up doing just following it by a white line, which turns out pretty effective too. But you can use either. It's what really suits you best. But yeah, and I changed the opacity to suit me. But yeah, that's just a simple scale thing there. I'll just go ahead and delete those layers now. What you want to do for the detailed scales now is you just make a new layer, and with the pen, I make my scale sort of diamond shape, but they don't have like the real rough pointed edges. They're kind of round. Instead of like that sort of a scale, they're like this. It just helps the overlapping effect look better. So what you want to do now is you want to get a decent size. Actually, I think I'll use the airbrush for this. Use the airbrush for most of these sorts of parts. And you just want to start by drawing some scales. They don't have to be completely even because, like I said, like I mentioned before, scales aren't the most even thing. So yeah, I'm just gonna draw a few just to show you like the shades and stuff, how I do it. So you wouldn't really want, this isn't really outlining the scales, this is more what I do as a part of the details for the scales. So I'm just gonna do a few here just to show you. So what you want to do after you've, actually might draw another one here. So what you want to do after you've done the black part of it, you make a layer below it and you get white, and then you just sort of outline like whichever way your light source is coming from. See if my light source came from down here, I would actually I'm gonna put the lights on this side, like just the white on this side, because later on I'm gonna put like a line here and shade it that way and put the highlights on this side. So you just want to sort of not run along the entire thing, but run along one side of it, just to give it like a sort of not that really embedded effect. So I'll just speed it up for you guys, and yeah, I'll speed it up. Okay, so now if you've completed that, what you want to do is go over to your layers, and you can set the opacity. I would set the black to a little bit more than half, and because the white is lighter than black, I'd set it to a little bit below half, so that way it doesn't look so dense and fake. So then after that, I get a layer and put it below the white and the black layer. So I might just label it that layer black, and I'll label this one white. This next layer is actually going to be the first part of the darks, which I was talking about before. So what you want to do is get your pen tool and select black, and the reason for it being behind these two layers is, well, I'm gonna set the opacity lower on this one later, but yeah, so the other layer is over the top, which should be good. So what you want to do is you get your pen and you just draw a line from the top corner to the bottom of the scale. This will give it a sort of 3D look to the scale, because scales aren't exactly flat, they do have dimension to them. So you'll just want to draw that like so, and then after you've done that, I tend not to use the blur tool unless I'm doing a very small area or somewhere that I don't want blended much. So I tend to use the water tool a lot. It gives it a better effect. So what you want to do is you just grab your water tool. I don't have the density all the way up because it'd work too fast then. So what you want to do, you want to come along and just sort of blend the edges of these scales and see. I'm going to make my brush just a little bigger. You just want to sort of blend it down a bit. So you see it's starting to already get that 3D effect. It looks like it's sort of coming up into a sort of point. I know the rest of the details will make it look better, but yeah, just go ahead and do that for the rest of the scales. Okay, so after you've done that, see, mine are a little bit dodgy because I've sort of rushed through it a little bit. But what you want to do after that is put a layer below the shading layer. I'm just gonna label it. Is it not working? Okay, you want to put a layer below the shading layer and label it lights and pick white, and then you go back and you do the same thing following the black line you did. Excuse me for the slight pause there. My tablet kind of disconnected itself for some reason, so I'm pretty sure it's working now. There we go. So yeah, what you want to do is you want to follow this line with white. I will change the layer opacity later after I've done the all the lights and darks in it. Oops. Just try and follow your line as best you can. That way it'll be a little more effective. Sometimes it's a little tricky to follow the line neatly, but after a little bit of practice, you get used to it, kind of. Yeah, so you just want to keep following that same line until you get to the bottom of the scales, and then once you are all the way at the bottom, or once you've completed all your scales, yeah, you do the same thing. You blend it, but you blend it this way now, so that'll give it the lighter effect. Oh god, it looks terrible. So yeah, I'll just do this scale to show you. And what you want to do after you have actually, I'm just going to set the opacity down to show you what it looks like. So you want the darks layer opacity to be more than the light, because the light layer will sort of overpower the dark layer. So yeah, as you can see, it's sort of taking shape now. So I'm just going to go ahead and complete the rest. And then I will show you where to put the highlights. If you've completed that, what I always like to do is, if the black line is, the shading is too sharp, I like to just go back over it with just maybe one stroke, and that'll just soften it up a little bit. Just makes it a little less less of an eyesore. So after I've done that, you can see that it is kind of taking shape. I might go back and just give my lights a little more of a shading, because they look a bit too outstanding and too much of an eyesore for that matter, and they gotta be blended in. So if you want to make any adjustments, if it looks a bit too rough or jagged for you, you can make some adjustments to suit you and how you like to do it. But yeah, so I can go back on my shading layer as well and do the same thing. Now, see, I believe my white lines are a little bit too dark, so I'm too bright, if you would say. So I just set the opacity down a little bit more. So what I'm going to do next is I'm going to put a layer above the shading but below the lights thing. So it depends on what color your light source is. If it's like green or blue, then you'd want to put like a, I'll just demonstrate blue, like a light blue. So if I had a light blue, very bright blue source there, I would, oh, that was terrible. I just draw in my source, my light source. So if I have a bright blue light source there, I'm just going to label this highlights. And then you want to go ahead and get either the airbrush tool or the pen tool, whichever you want to do. I'm going to use the pen tool for this, and you want to follow the opposite side. Oh, actually, I'll use the airbrush tool for this. It's a little softer. You want to follow the opposite side like this. So you just keep following. You just keep following it down. And I think the further away from your light source your scales get, they'll be less light, but I haven't got many scales here to work with, so I'm just going to demonstrate these few. So yeah, you just want to continue to follow this line, being careful not to go outside of it, because yeah, I just went outside, because that'll make it look a little messier if you go outside. So you'll just want to continue following the lines until you get to your last scale. Oh, made a mistake there. And then after this, what you want to do is, you can make this layer, if you want the lights to stand out a lot more once you've blended it, you can make it luminosity, but I would leave the layer mode on normal for now until you actually shade it. So yeah, so what you want to do, you're going to get your water brush and you shade that in just a little bit, and then once you just continue doing that until you get to the bottom, and I will meet you once you are done. So once your highlights are done, what you want to do is, if you feel like there isn't enough, or the highlights aren't strong enough, which I believe they aren't. You can switch the layer mode over to luminosity, which gives it a little more oomph, if you would say. But what I like to do sometimes is just select it all and then go Control C and then Control V. It copies the layer to a new layer, and I might just name this highlight copy. And it depends if you want to leave that as normal or luminosity. I'm actually going to set it to luminosity now because I really like the look of it. And what you may want to do is, because that might be like not blended enough, you could just go in and make the edges a little less sharp. And just go ahead and do that. I think I might do that for both layers. That way it makes it a little more smooth and maybe a little bit more eye-catching and a little more effective. So say if like there's blue fire or blue light or something, that would be reflecting off it. And maybe what you want to do next is you want to make a new layer, and I'm going to name this scale shade. Oops. What you want to do is this layer goes above the highlights and below it will be line art there. You want to grab a black again and your airbrush. And what you want to do is, because all these scales leave a shadow on the other scales, so I don't know, you just gotta come in like where there would be shades, which would be mostly at the top of the other scales. I'm not going to put it here because we're just going to make that the outside scale, but just pretend there's like some other scales here creating a shade on these ones. So that's just going to give it the effect that the scales are overlapping each other, so that's always good. I can't remember if I actually put the scale shading layer over or beneath the highlight layer, so I'm just going to do it first over the top of the highlight layer, and then I'll shade it and see how, like, blend it and see how it goes. If it doesn't look good, then I will put it beneath the highlight layer, which I think it might have to go under there. So what you have to do once you've done those bits is, get your water tool again, and then you come in and then you just shade it in a little bit. And later on you may want to make the opacity a little lower, but I like to keep it up depending on how good I think it looks. So you just want to continue to shade all this until you get to the bottom. And what I like to do, I like to check back and forth by zooming out, because it always looks better when it's zoomed out. So if it doesn't look like it's blended enough, I might go back and blend it some more like this. And if it's not enough, which it doesn't look like it is, I like to, like I did before with the highlights, I may like to select it, copy the layer, and maybe make the opacity of this layer lower, and just blend it a little more so it doesn't look as sharp or bad. So I might try and bring the highlight layers over the top. Yeah, I don't know. I think the highlight layer is supposed to actually go over the top, but I'll just leave it like that for now. And if your light source is really, really close to your scales, then what I like to do, I'll just make a new layer and get black and just put, that was terrible. put a bit of a bigger shade on these sides, so it just gives the effect that there's a lot of light there. And oh, this is very rough, but it is just a tutorial, so yeah. And then if you're like it's all rough and jagged, you can like, and it's gone into other scales, you can just remove a little bit from below, like I'm doing here. And then oops, my bad. And then what you want to do after that is you get your water tool and shade it in. I know it looks really dark now, and probably thinking it just defeats the whole purpose of adding all that detail and shading in beforehand, but no, I will be changing the opacity of this to suit the scales or the color or whatever. I've never really done blue scales before, but that was just a color that I picked at the start because, well, doing black scales is the hardest because you're always using dark you're using dark colors to shade the scales, and I find that it's a little trickier. So what I tend to do is if you're doing a black dragon or black scales or something, what you'd want to do is actually make the color of the dragon like a very dark grey, but not black, so it will have a difference. So then once you add in things like highlights to the dragon itself, then you will have it will be easier to work with the scales. So yeah, and then you can just work from there. So I think that's about it for the scales. I'll just check back on my other picture that I did. I can show you guys that. This is actually part of my speed paint that I'm doing, but as you can see here, I've done those sorts of scales on this dragon, I think here, and see she's got larger scales along her head there, and those bits there, and they fade off towards the head a little bit, and some scales there. But yeah, it's just all where you put the highlights and darks and that make it look good. See, doesn't look that great close up, but from a distance it looks pretty alright. So yeah, they're the I might just crop it. They're the scales, and that's how I do my scales. If you want to learn anything else or whatever else you want to do, tongue twisted, whatever else you want me to do as tutorials, just leave in the comments and I'll see what I can do. I hope you enjoyed this, and I hope you have fun doing some scales.